Hello everyone and welcome back. We're going to do our lab overview demo here of lab 6, which is our simple Java program. So let's go ahead and scroll on down and look at our objectives here for the lab. So by the end of this lab you'll write a simple Java program that performs basic arithmetic operations, understand how to use variables and data types and operators in a Java program, and practice using control flow statements to handle decision making in your code. You'll also gain experience with input and output operations in Java, and finally use the JDoodle editor to write, compile, and execute your program. So let's go ahead and take a look at step 1 of our simple Java program. Okay, in step 1 of our lab, I've taken the code example here and I've pasted it into our JDoodle editor. So let's take a look at the code. At the top, we're creating a scanner object to read input from the user. And then we're printing out a prompt to enter in the first number, which we're reading into num1 from the scanner, and then printing out the prompt, enter the second number, which then we're reading that number into num2. Then we're going down and performing a bunch of arithmetic operations. We're doing a sum, a difference, a product, and a quotient, and you can see the formula for those. And then finally we're going to print out the results. So let's look at one important note here is that when you run this code, you have to make sure that the interactive mode toggle is set on. That way it can read the data in from the small console here. So if you don't do that, you'll get an error, but that's the reason why you haven't selected the interactive mode. So I'm going to go ahead and click execute here. And it takes just a second to compile, so I'm going to enter in my first number is 10. And my second number, I'm going to get the prompt here and I'm going to enter in 5. And it does the calculations and it'll go ahead and print those out. So you can see the sum is 15, the difference is 5, the product is 50, and the quotient is 2. So that's the part 1. Make sure that you have the matching beginning and ending curly brace, otherwise you'll get an error, and that you have the correct import statement at the top, that all of the code is intact. So that's part 1 of this lab. Let's go ahead and look at the next part. Okay, in part 2 of this lab, we're going to add an additional operator. So I've gone ahead and I've put in this additional code and put in the comment here. Now, remember that anything that starts with the / mark as a comment just helps put notes in the code to remind you of different things. So it's always a best practice to put in some comments in your code to understand what you're doing here. So I've declared a double called remainder and using the percent operator here to calculate the remainder and then printing out the results. So let's go ahead and execute this code. And I'm going to put in the same arguments just to be consistent before. So our first number is 10 and the second number will be 5. I'm getting the prompt for that. Enter in 5. It's running through the calculations and I have to do just a little bit of scrolling here so that we can see our remainder is 0, which is correct. The last part of this lab, you're going to put in some example input validation to check to see if num2 is not equal to 0, so it'll do the division calculation. And otherwise, it's going to print out an error message saying you're not allowed to do division by 0. So this is a case of validating some input, and you can insert that code right here after the num2 calculation. So I'll leave that up to you, and that's really it for this lab. I just wanted to walk through kind of the highlights here so to get you started. Pretty straightforward lab, but be patient, make sure you have all the code in the right place so that it compiles and you don't get any errors. Well, that's it for this lab walkthrough video. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.